Neil from Enable Access, who's, I think, Neil, you're wandering around your showroom. So over to you.
Thank you very much, Paul, and absolutely welcome to the showroom here at Enable Access. My name's Neil, and at Enable Access, we specialise in working with the local authority teams, the minor major adaptation teams, the DFG teams, obviously the occupational therapists and prescribers and the technical officers, case officers, as well as also with the community equipment teams as well on the smaller side of things. So clearly today the focus is on modular product and finding fast solutions to hospital discharge challenges at the minute. Clearly there's a need for hospital discharges to be accelerated and to support that where possible. If people can be discharged back into their own homes, everyone knows the quality of life and the care is much better than putting them into care homes where that can be avoided. So this is what we call our welcome residential modular ramp system. And this was designed in line with feedback from occupational therapists and also in line with building regulations document M for residential installed ramps for standard dwellings. So all the dimensions and the specifications are very much designed around those building regulations guidelines. This is often used through a disabled facilities grant, often fitted through a disabled facilities grant around all over the UK. It's also often used as well through rapid hospital discharge grants, or sometimes they're known as palliative care grants, where you need to move quickly. As we know, although where our teams are obviously out there surveying for, assessing and fitting these very quickly, we can turn these around typically within a 1 to 2 week fitting. We design and manufacture here in Leighton Buzzard, and we stock the components so we can build and install them very quickly. But of course, sometimes the delays can be on the local authority side, actually physically managing the volume through the process. And that's where sometimes a hospital discharge grant or a non-means tested grant facilitated through your RRO policy, perhaps, for example, up to £5,000 without means testing, for example, can be a good way of getting a modular ramp and platform in very quickly. So the system itself has what we call our special grip deck surface, which is, if you like, millions of tiny surface modifications all over the surface of the ramp, makes it extremely anti-slip even when wet. Now, this was obviously very critical in our country where we have our fair share of rain. As you'd expect, typically standard shiny checker plate or other types of metal can be pretty good for slip resistant when wet, when dry, sorry, but can get extremely slippery when wet because you kind of get the water, you kind of aquaplane over the top. And that's why we created this special surface we call grip deck, millions of tiny surface modifications all over the surface of the ramp, gives it like a rough finish. We worked alongside the BRE, the Building Research Establishment, and that's now tested through a third-party company. It means it's extremely anti-slip even when wet. Strangely enough, when we had it retested again the other day, it was actually slightly more slip resistant when wet than when dry for some random reason. But either way, you have a really safe slip resistant surface. Also, being a solid surface rather than mesh, it has built-in drainage, but it also prevents anything growing up through it, whether that be grass or weeds or whatever else that can again affect the integrity of the slip resistance of the ramp. Now, I suppose typically your typical configuration would be to have a platform outside the door. It's good practice to have a level platform outside the door. And again, that ties up with building regulations guidelines, and then a ramp off it. And being a modular system, if we need a longer ramp, we simply add modules and keep going. If we need to turn a corner, we can add a platform and turn around the corner. We can add to this handrails, clearly single handrails or double handrails, usually with a mid-rail on one side and or both sides, typically, again, of any size of the system. You can have ambulance steps. You can add a gate, again, for ambulant users for where the route needs to be a shorter route out for perhaps a post-delivery person or something like that to shortcut the ramp. Very similar to probably what a number of you are doing through concrete ramps at the minute, but has a number of benefits. I suppose one of the key ones, of course, coming back to that point of speed. It can be done very quickly. It can also be reconfigured if someone's needs changed. So if, for example, they now needed a longer ramp, a shallower ramp, we can simply reconfigure, add, and change the system to suit their new requirements. Handrails, as standard, are this grey graphite colour. And this was chosen with a panel of occupational therapists a number of years ago who chose this colour as being the most universal colour to blend in with as many different properties and background types as possible. But we have more recently also introduced as standard colours, you have this heritage brown, garden green, or safety yellow to give you the ability to blend in with a garden type background, a heritage property, or of course to contrast visually where needed. Makes no difference to the cost or the lead time. You've got those options, or in the case of a lady the other day, to match her sunflowers. These handrails, again, are sometimes referred to as warm to touch. Now, they're not heated, but because of the double coating, the galvanized and the powder coating, it means they have that warm to touch finish, so it doesn't wick away the warmth from your hand like a standard shiny metal surface would otherwise do. Now, one other key point about this system, this is what we call our, as I say, our welcome modular ramp system, is we've very much focused as a company, we've done many surveys around the biggest ramping and access challenge faced by occupational therapists and prescribers. And the number one challenge nearly every time is UPVC thresholds. Now, your typical response, I guess, as DFG teams, most of you involved in major housing adaptations, is that when you come across a door with a UPVC threshold, you'll rip it out and replace it with a new low threshold door. And sometimes there is no way of avoiding that, and it can be a good solution. But what typically happens is you've then got an additional cost of perhaps £1,500+. You've got maybe an additional contractor, the time delays, however many weeks of delays to actually get that done and fitted in place. And not everyone actually wants their door replaced. And we had a case the other day where the lady was saying that I've put in this new composite door. I don't want to have a standard council, with all respect to what would be provided through a grant, standard low threshold door put in. It's going to devalue my property. So we've very much focused on ways to solve this UPVC threshold. And we have some very clever platform, system and threshold ramp solutions that we can use to overcome that UPVC threshold. So just one of the examples, here's a UPVC threshold. The main issue you have is that having come up from the outside, over however many steps and so on, ramped to the threshold, you then have this drop on the inside of the threshold. So we have a whole range of threshold ramp solutions, but just a couple that are worth particularly noting. Where the user or the carer is able to lift a small, lightweight, portable threshold ramp, the Doorline multi-threshold ramp has a special hook-over right-angled lip that's designed to hook over the top lip of that UPVC threshold coming up from the outside, and you can simply hook it up and over the top of that threshold, and that then handles that drop down onto the inside. So we can come right up to the top of that threshold from the outside, and this will then handle the drop on the inside. And in many cases, you saved yourself the cost, time, and hassle of replacing that low threshold door. In some cases where we're still wanting to move quickly, but maybe they aren't able to put something down, this is another example of one of the ramps which we manufacture. We supply a lot of these through community equipment. This is what we call our Doorline Vary Wedge, which is an adjustable height threshold wedge ramp. Has a range of different heights on the back, like a ladder rack of different heights. Comes with 3 nuts and bolts and a spanner, and you can simply adjust it to match the height of that threshold or step within the thickness of a coin. So in this particular situation here, we can wind it up as high as possible to allow an inward opening, typically door, to open over the top of it to give the maximum height for the ramp whilst minimizing the drop coming in from the inside. So this is a good leave-in-place option. So where this can come in well, as opposed to concrete, is sometimes, obviously, you need to move quickly, as we said, and it can be a very fast solution. Sometimes you have a landlord situation where they say, absolutely no way, are you modifying my property, or the end user, the service user client can say the same, you're not modifying my property, and this can be put in over existing properties, paths and steps. So it can be a very good solution for that as well. Unlike concrete, you don't have the issues of the current weather situation, for example, where it could be too cold or too wet to put in concrete, and you've got the additional delays and challenges of trying to get hold of a contractor. So that's just a few key points on the Welcome modular ramp system, which, as I say, we survey for and are fitting all over England, especially. We've also got some other clever ways of overcoming soft ground, grass and gravel that work alongside it. Now, just to touch briefly on another modular product that's related to this, these are what we call our welcome giant half steps. Sadly, I haven't got time to go over these in detail today, but just to highlight again where a modular product can work extremely well. These were originally designed off the back of feedback from occupational therapists who told us that there wasn't a half step available that was large enough to take a user with their walking frame, or even more so with their rollator, so that they could stand on that step safely and undo the front door. So they'd be balancing on the edge of that step. So we now have 3 sizes: the midi, typically for the walking stick user, the large, typically for the walking user, and the extra large, the biggest of all, a full 3 foot long, typically for the rollator user. It tends to be the largest of the 3 devices, so that they can stand on there safely with their mobility device and undo their front door. Being a modular system, it has a full range of height adjustment with a height extension kit right up to 8 inches high, which means you can join the steps together. We can add anti-trip toe plates, which come as standard, so you can't get your foot caught underneath the step. We can add a handrail accessory on one side or on both sides of the steps, and we can come right up again with a special door plate right to the top lip of the UPVC threshold without resting on it or touching it. So what this has done is turned what would otherwise be perhaps a minor or major adaptation in terms of concrete into a simple to specify, quick to fit piece of equipment. So just to round off then, as I say, we specialise in working with the local authority teams and the loan equipment store teams. Sometimes because of the delays with the DFG process, you need to resort back down the route of a minor adaptation or a piece of community equipment through the community equipment route. And that's why we very much specialise in designing and manufacturing everything from lightweight portable ramps through to threshold ramps, through to a quick perm ramp leave in place option, and then right the way up through to the modular install system. So I appreciate it's a bit of a whistle-stop tour. We'll put our contact details in here. Be very glad to follow up afterwards if anyone has any queries. We would also be very happy to share a copy of our access and ramp assessment guide. Just drop me an email. We'll put the email address in. Drop us an email and we'll be very glad to send you one of these. This has got details on choosing the correct ramp type, working out gradients and lengths. We've got a calculator tool under the resources tab on our website too. This is a really useful tool. Be very happy to send that to you. Just drop us an email. We'll send that through. We also, have as an option, we have a full live demonstration webinar where we can walk you through the whole range to give you the full time. It takes just over an hour to give you the range of the full products and where they fit into the equipment and minor adaptations, disabled facilities grant major adaptation applications. We'll put the link in the chat for that one as well. So thank you very much. I'm very happy to take any questions.
Thanks, Neil. Yeah, I think it was quite impressive how you were answering questions on the chat at the same time as talking. So I think most of them have been answered. But yeah, if you have to carry on answering the questions in the chat, I think your alter ego has probably answered most of them already. But I suppose just one there in terms of do you have any issues with theft of modular steps or ramps?
I don't think we've ever had any reported. That's typically because they would be fixed down. Yeah. So because they're fixed down to the ground, we haven't had any theft issues at all. Yes, you've got to be sensible about such things, but fixing it down is usually enough to solve any issues like that. That's a good question.
Great. Thanks, Neil. Thanks. I think there are a few more questions there in the chat. So yeah, I'll leave you to respond to those. Yeah, I assume you've got somebody else there that's doing the camera and answering questions at the same time.
Absolutely. Yes, I have a colleague with me today.
Excellent.
Glad to support.
Thank you to them as well. Thanks, Neil.